Hello, fifth graders, and welcome to your language arts lesson for today. As usual, today you will need your copy of Little Women and perhaps paper and pencil to help you with keeping track of your answers. So, we're going to take a look first at our most recent homework assignment for that long video that we had on Tuesday, and then we'll talk about today's homework. So, number one, the question is, where is Meg going? The correct answer is that Meg is going to the Muffets. 2, what delivery did Meg get? She got flowers from Lori. 3, who do the Moffats think that Meg loves? They think that she loves Lori, though we kind of get into that in more detail as the chapter goes on. What did Meg overhear at the party? She overheard that people were saying that Marmee planned to have one of her daughters marry Lori for his money. Number 5, how did Lori react to Meg's clothes? By saying that he did not like her dressed like that. He didn't like it. Then they asked, what is Mrs. Murch's plan for her girls? And she said quite a few things, but of the choices, this middle option is the best. It says that she plans to have her girls happily married to good people, even if that means being poor. Okay, so which theme does this relate to? This is going to relate to our theme, the relationship between money and happiness, right? And Marmee in particular is a character who continues to try to impress upon her daughters that having money doesn't shield you from unhappiness, nor is it should that be the main or only goal of your life, okay? And irksome, make sure you're checking. I mean, you should always be checking for my comments, but make sure you're checking to see what I said about your vocabulary sentences and if there are any tweaks that need to be made. So, looking at today, we have a kind of a different chapter, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I'm just going to go over these questions first of all. So, question 1 asks, what is the Pickwick portfolio? 2, who were the authors of the Pickwick portfolio? 3 asks, who was Anniversary Ode written by? This is a question in which the text is not going to tell us the answer, but there will be clues as we're reading through, and I'll be talking about that as we're having this conversation. So then question 4, I'm asking you to think about the character that you picked. So whoever you picked here, think about that character, and then be specific in this answer that you're going to give. How do you know that she was the author? Okay, so again, we're going to talk about it, but we have to kind of think about who you pick, and then how do you know that she is the author? Number 5, similar question. Who was the History of a Squash written by? So you're going to pick. And then for 6, based on that answer, based on who you picked, you want to think about that character and then be specific when you tell me, how do you know that she was the author? For both 4 and 6, remember that your answer would be, I know that she was the author because blank. Number 7, who wrote the letter that started, Mr. Pickwick, sir? So you want to select your answer, and then similarly for number 8, think about that character and then give specific reasons. How did you know that she was the author? Again, I know that she was the author because. And then question 9 is asking, what was the birdhouse used as? We're going to see that described in the chapter. So looking at our objective today, in which I'm saying that we're going to be working on characterizing the girls. And so what this means is this kind of a different chapter. We're going to move away from the plot for a little bit, and we're going to be reading some of the girls' writing, which maybe is giving you hints already about what the Pickwick portfolio is. But as we're reading, they're going to be taking on fake names and fake personas. So they're going to be pretending to be a particular person. And as they're doing so, we kind of have to think about what hints or clues do we have that's going to help us to understand who is who. What do we know about Jo that seems to maybe show up in something that she's written, or Meg, or Amy, or Beth? What do we know about them? So I'll kind of talk us through as we go, and then hopefully with a little bit of listening to that conversation, you will get the hang of it and kind of figure out what it is that I'm asking. Okay, so we have to kind of think about, and maybe characterizing, maybe it's applying what we know about their characters. So it's going to use some of what we've already done to characterize them. So go ahead and get your books open to page 101. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a different kind of chapter, but it's a fun one. So, and we'll get started together. Chapter 10, the PC and PO. As spring came on, a new set of amusements became the fashion, and the lengthening of days gave long afternoons for work and play of all sorts. You guys probably know that, right? As winter comes in, the days get shorter and it's harder to do things after your schoolwork, maybe. But in the spring and the summer, they get longer and you kind of play outside longer and do more things. The garden had to be put in order, and each sister had a quarter of the little plot to do what she liked with. Hannah used to say, "I'd know which each of them gardens belonged to if I'm seen 'em in shiny." And so she might, for the girls' tastes differed as much as their characters. Meg's had roses and heliotrope, myrtle, and a little orange tree in it. Jo's bed was never alike 2 seasons, for she was always trying experiments. This year it was to be a plantation of sunflowers, the seeds of which cheerful and aspiring plant were to feed Aunt Cockletop and her family of chicks. Beth had old-fashioned fragrant flowers in her garden, sweet peas and mignonette, larkspur, pinks, pansies, and southernwood, with chickweed for the bird and catnip for the pussies. Amy had a bower in hers, rather small and earwiggy, but very pretty to look at, with honeysuckles and morning glories hanging their colored horns and bells and graceful wreaths all over it, tall white lilies, delicate ferns, and as many brilliant, picturesque plants as would consent to blossom there. Gardening, walks, rows on the river, and flower hunts employed the fine days, and for rainy ones they had house diversions, some old, some new, all more or less original. One of these was the PC, for as secret societies were the fashion, it was thought proper to have one. And as all of the girls admired Dickens, they called themselves the Pickwick Club. And so we see the footnote tells us that this is in reference to a Charles Dickens novel, the Pickwick Papers, and so they're kind of pretending to be in that book, and they call it the Pickwick Club. With a few interruptions, they had kept this up for a year and met every Saturday evening in the big garret, that's their attic, on which occasions the ceremonies were as follows. 3 chairs were arranged in a row before a table on which was a lamp, also 4 white badges with a big PC in different colors on each, and the weekly newspaper, called the Pickwick Portfolio, answer to question 1, to which all contributed something, while Jo, who reveled in pens and ink, was the editor. At 7 o'clock, the 4 members ascended to the clubroom, tied their badges round their heads, and took their seats with great solemnity. Meg, as the eldest, was Samuel Pickwick. Jo, being of a literary turn, Augustus Snodgrass. Beth, because she was round and rosy, Tracy Tupman. And Amy, who was always trying to do what she couldn't, was Nathaniel Winkle. So the footnote again tells us they kind of have picked characters from this book by Charles Dickens that they relate to, and then that's who they're pretending to be. So there's, it's like acting out parts of the story, maybe. Pickwick, the president, read the paper, which was filled with original tales, poetry, local news, funny advertisements, and hints in which they good naturedly reminded each other of their faults and shortcomings. On one occasion, Mr. Pickwick put on a pair of spectacles without any glasses, rapped upon the table, and having stared hard at Mr. Snodgrass, who was tilting back in his chair, till he arranged himself properly, began to read. And so this is just an issue of their newspaper that they do. So we're going to read through it, and then we'll see a little bit of the girls' characters as we go. So the Pickwick Portfolio, May 20th, 18 some date. Poets Corner. Anniversary Ode. So we've actually talked about 1 and 2, okay? And so now we're getting into this question 3. So we have to be thinking about, as we're reading question 3, as we're reading the Anniversary Ode, who seems likely to have written this particular poem. Again we meet to celebrate with badge and solemn rite our 52nd anniversary in Pickwick Hall tonight. We all are here in perfect health, none gone from our small band. Again we see each well-known face and press each friendly hand. Our Pickwick always at his post with reverence we greet, as spectacles on nose he reads our well-filled weekly sheet. Although he suffers from a cold, we joy to hear him speak, for words of wisdom from him fall in spite of croak or squeak. Old 6-foot Snodgrass looms on high with elephantine grace, and beams upon the company with brown and jovial face. Poetic fire lights up his eye, he struggles 'gainst his lot, Behold ambition on his brow, and on his nose a blot. Next our peaceful Tupman comes, so rosy, plump, and sweet, who chokes with laughter at the puns and tumbles off his seat. Prim little Winkle, too, is here, with every hair in place, a model of propriety, though he hates to wash his face. The year is gone, we still unite, to joke and laugh and read, and tread the path of literature that doth to glory lead. Long may our paper prosper well, our club unbroken be, and coming years their blessings pour on the useful gay PC. So, thinking about what you just read, and you have three choices for number three. So, I'm going to walk us through 3 and 4 so that you really get an idea of what it is that you should be doing for the remaining questions. So, your options are Meg, Joe, and Beth. So, of those three, who seems most likely to have written Anniversary Ode? I know you can look back in the previous paragraph and figure it out, but we can also use what we know about these characters in order to make this connection. So, Meg, Joe, or Beth? So we should be thinking Joe for number 3. The correct answer being Anniversary Ode was written by Joe. Okay. So then 4 is asking, how do you know that she was the author? So as you're setting up your answer, you would say, I know that she was the author because, so we kind of have to think of because why. And I don't want your answer to be because the book tells us A. Snodgrass is Joe. That's not what I'm looking at. We're really looking at applying characteristics about Joe. So things that come to mind, because Joe is a really great writer, would be a good one. Or Joe likes to write poetry, or Joe likes to practice writing. Those would all be excellent ways to do this. Or she talks about literature, the path of literature leading to glory, right? And Joe loves to read. So these would all be great answers, right? I know that she was the author because Joe really likes writing. I know that she was the author because Joe talks about literature and she loves to read. Okay, all of those would be great answers. So you really should be kind of with 3 and 4 feeling confident about that. Okay, and this should give you a little bit of an idea about what we're going to do for 5 and 6. And you should still kind of reflect on it for this next one. So the masked marriage is another entry from somebody. A Tale of Venice. So it's going to be a story that we're going to hear kind of about people and being in love and marriage. Gondola after gondola swept up to the marble steps and left its lovely load to swell the brilliant throng that filled the stately halls of Count d'Adelon. Knights and ladies, elves and pages, monks and flower girls, all mingled gaily in the dance. Sweet voices and rich melody filled the air, and so, with mirth and music, the masquerade went on. Has your highness seen the Lady Viola tonight? Asked the gallant troubadour of the fairy queen who floated down the hall upon his arm. Yes, is she not lovely, though so sad? Her dress is well chosen, too, for in a week she weds Count Antonio, whom she passionately hates. So we meet this character, Lady Viola, who is supposed to be marrying the Count Antonio, who she doesn't want to marry. By my faith, I envy him. Yonder he comes, arrayed like a bridegroom, except the black mask. So he's coming and dressed like a groom, but his face is covered. When that is off, we shall see how he regards the fair maid, whose heart he cannot win, though her stern father bestows her hand, returned the troubadour. 'Tis whispered that she loves the young English artist who haunts her steps and is spurned by the old count, said the lady as they joined the dance. So Lady Viola loves somebody else, or Viola, but she's not allowed to marry him because her dad won't allow it. The revel was at its height when a priest appeared, and withdrawing the young pair to an alcove hung with purple velvet, he motioned them to kneel. Instant silence fell upon the gay throng, and not a sound but the dash of fountains or the rustle of orange groves sleeping in the moonlight broke the hush, as Count d'Adelon spoke thus. My lords and ladies, pardon the ruse by which I have gathered you here to witness the marriage of my daughter. Father, we wait your services. So we see that his daughter has come, and then a masked gentleman who she's supposed to be marrying has also come, and they're going to get married. All eyes turned toward the bridal party, and a low murmur of amazement went through the throng, for neither bride nor groom removed their masks. Interesting. She wants to marry somebody else, but she's supposed to marry this guy, and they're both masked. So I think, Curiosity and wonder possessed all hearts, but respect restrained all tongues till the holy rite was over. Then the eager spectators gathered round the count, demanding an explanation. Gladly would I give it if I could, but I only know that it was the whim of my timid Viola, and I yielded to it. Now, my children, let the play end, unmask and receive my blessing. But neither bent the knee, for the young bridegroom replied in a tone that startled all listeners as the mask fell, disclosing the noble face of Ferdinand Devereux, the artist lover, and leaning on the breast where now flashed the star of an English earl was the lovely Viola, radiant with joy and beauty. So it was actually the man she wanted to marry on the mask. So now they're married, and he now has this title because he married her. My lord, you scornfully bade me claim your daughter when I could boast as high a name and vast a fortune as the Count Antonio. I can do more, for even your ambitious soul cannot refuse the Earl of Devereux and de Vere when he gives his ancient name and boundless wealth in return for the beloved hand of this fair lady, now my wife. The count stood like one changed to stone, and turning to the bewildered crowd, Ferdinand added with a gay smile of triumph, to you, my gallant friends, I can only wish that your wooing may prosper as mine has done, and that you may all win as fair a bride as I have by this masked marriage. S. Pickwick. So I didn't ask you a question about this one, but practicing, this is a great one to practice. So, who do we think probably wrote a story about people falling in love and getting married and sort of masked trickery in order to do so? I think the two characters who would be most likely would be Meg or Amy because they're very romantically inclined. But we know about Amy, and she maybe isn't always the best with her words or her spelling or her vocabulary. So I think this would be Meg, right? So if you were answering this, you would say, I know that Meg was the author because she likes romantic stories, okay? For instance, we're not actually doing a question about that story, but this gives you an idea of what you might do. The next is a joke, kind of related to the Bible. So, why is the PC like the Tower of Babel? It is full of unruly members. The history of a squash. So this one is one of the ones that I've asked you about for number 5. Once upon a time, a farmer planted a little seed in his garden, and after a while it sprouted and became a vine and bore many squashes. One day in October, when they were ripe, he picked one and took it to market. A grocerman bought and put it in his shop. That same morning, a little girl in a brown hat and blue dress with a round face and snub nose went and bought it for her mother. She lugged it home, cut it up, and boiled it in the big pot, mashed some of it with salt and butter for dinner, and to the rest she added a pint of milk, 2 eggs, 4 spoons of sugar, nutmeg, and some crackers, put it in a deep dish, and baked it till it was brown and nice, and next day it was eaten by a family named March. So, who was this story written by? Question 5. So, Meg, Joe, and Beth. So, I'm not going to tell you, but I want you to kind of think about who would write a story, kind of a simple story about a squash and how it was grown and then purchased and then cooked. And then thinking about number 6, how do you know that she was the author? So, I know that she was the author because what do we know about this character? About her interests or the way that she thinks or the way that she looks at the world. Okay? Hopefully you're having some ideas based on what I read and what I said. Okay. Our next one is related to 7, right? Who wrote the letter? Mr. Pickwick, sir. That's what I'm going to read now. Mr. Pickwick, sir, I address you upon the subject of Sin the Sinner, I mean, as a man named Winkle who makes trouble in his club by laughing and sometimes won't write his piece in this fine paper. I hope you will pardon his badness and let him send a little French fable because he can't write out of his head, as he has so many lessons to do and no brains in future. I will try to take time by the fetlock and prepare some work, which will be all comme il faut. That means, all right, I am in haste, as it is nearly school time. Yours respectably, N. Winkle. And then the editor's note says, the above is a manly and handsome acknowledgement of past misdemeanors. If our young friend studied punctuation, it would be well. And we get from the footnote, she says time by the fetlock, but the saying is actually time by the forelock. Okay, and then she means comme il faut, which is French for proper, but she says comme il faut. So again, we think, who wrote the letter started Mr. Pickwick, sir? And then how do you know that? I know that she was the author because what do we know about this character? Okay, hopefully you have some really good ideas about those last 4 questions. Okay. A sad accident from the editor of the paper. On Friday last, we were startled by a violent shock in our basement, followed by cries of distress. On rushing in a body to the cellar, we discovered our beloved president prostrate upon the floor, having tripped and fallen while getting wood for domestic purposes. A perfect scene of ruin met our eyes, for in his fall, Mr. Pickwick had plunged his head and shoulders into a tub of water, upset a keg of soft soap upon his manly form, and torn his garments badly. On being removed from this perilous situation, it was discovered that he had suffered no injury, but several bruises, and, we are happy to add, is now doing well. The public bereavement. It is our painful duty to record the sudden and mysterious disappearance of our cherished friend, Mrs. Snowball Patpaw. This lovely and beloved cat was the pet of a large circle of warm and admiring friends. For her beauty attracted all eyes, her graces and virtues endeared her to all hearts, and her loss is deeply felt by the whole community. When last seen, she was sitting at the gate watching the butcher's cart, and it is feared that some villain, tempted by her charms, basely stole her. Weeks have passed, but no trace of her has been discovered, and we relinquish all hope, tie a black ribbon to her basket, set aside her dish, and weep for her as one lost to us forever. A sympathizing friend sends the following gem, a lament for S.B. Patpaw. S.B. stands for Snowball, so this is a poem for their cat that they no longer have. We mourn the loss of our little pet, and sigh o'er her hapless fate, for never more by the fire she'll sit, nor play by the old green gate. The little grave where her infant sleeps is 'neath the chestnut tree, but o'er her grave we may not weep, we know not where it may be. Her empty bed, her idle ball, will never see her more, no gentle tap, no loving purr is heard at the parlor door. Another cat comes after her mice, a cat with a dirty face, but she does not hunt as our darling did, nor play with her airy grace. Her stealthy paws tread the very hall where Snowball used to play, but she only spits at the dogs our pet so gallantly drove away. She is useful and mild, and does her best, but she is not fair to see, and we cannot give her your place, dear, nor worship her as we worship thee. Some advertisements. Miss Oranthy Bluggage, the accomplished, strong-minded lecturer, will deliver her famous lecture on Woman and Her Position at Pickwick Hall next Saturday evening after the usual performances. So you can kind of imagine who is pretending to be Oranthy Bluggage, who would give Woman in Her Position. Strong-minded lecturer. That sounds like Joe to me. A weekly meeting will be held at Kitchen Place to teach young ladies how to cook. Hannah Brown will preside, and all are invited to attend. The Dustpan Society will meet on Wednesday next and parade in the upper story of the clubhouse. All members to appear in uniform and shoulder their brooms at 9 precisely. Mrs. Beth Bouncer will open her new assortment of dolls' millinery next week. The latest pair of fashions have arrived, and orders are respectfully solicited. So again, probably Beth here, right? Having clothing for the dolls. A new play will appear at Barnville Theater in the course of a few weeks, which will surpass anything ever seen on the American stage. The Greek Slave, or Constantine the Avenger, is the name of this thrilling drama. Hints. If SP didn't use so much soap on his hands, he wouldn't always be late at breakfast. AS is requested not to whistle in the street. TT, please don't forget Amy's napkin. NW must not fret because his dress has not 9 tucks. Weekly report. Meg, good. Joe, bad. Beth, very good. Amy, middling. So that's an example of their newspaper. As the president finished reading the paper, which I beg leave to assure my readers is a bona fide copy of one written by bona fide girls once upon a time, a round of applause followed, and then Mr. Snodgrass rose to make a proposition. Mr. President and gentlemen, he began, assuming a parliamentary attitude and tone, I wish to propose the admission of a new member, one who highly deserves the honor, would be deeply grateful for it, and would add immensely to the spirit of the club, the literary value of the paper, and be no end jolly and nice. I propose Mr. Theodore Lawrence as an honorary member of the P.C. Come now, do have him. Joe's sudden change of tone made the girls laugh, but all looked rather anxious, and no one said a word, as Snodgrass took his seat. We'll put it to a vote, said the president. All in favor of this motion, please to manifest it by saying aye. A loud response from Snodgrass followed, to everybody's surprise, by a timid one from Beth. So Beth says, yeah, let's let him in. Contrary-minded say no. Meg and Amy were contrary-minded, and Mr. Winkle rose to say with great elegance, we don't wish any boys. They only joke and bounce about. This is a ladies' club, and we wish to be private and proper. I'm afraid he'll laugh at our paper and make fun of us afterward, observed Pickwick, pulling the little curl on her forehead as she always did when doubtful. Up rose Snodgrass, very much in earnest. Sir, I give you my word as a gentleman. Laurie won't do anything of the sort. He likes to write, and he'll give a tone to our contributions and keep us from being sentimental, don't you see? We can do so little for him, and he does so much for us. I think the least we can do is to offer him a place here, and make him welcome if he comes. The artful allusion to benefits conferred brought Tupman to his feet, looking as if he had quite made up his mind. Yes, we ought to do it, even if we are afraid. I say he may come, and his grandpa too, if he likes. This spirited burst from Beth electrified the club, and Jo left her seat to shake hands approvingly. Now then, vote again. Everybody, remember it's our Laurie, and say aye, cried Snodgrass excitedly. Aye, 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 replied three voices at once. Good. Bless you. Now, as there's nothing like taking time by the fetlock, as Winkle characteristically observes, allow me to present the new member. And to the dismay of the rest of the club, Jo threw open the door of the closet and displayed Laurie sitting on a rag bag, flushed and twinkling with suppressed laughter. So Laurie had been there the whole time, and Jo and Laurie had tricked them. You rogue, you traitor, Jo, how could you? Cried the three girls, as Snodgrass led her friend triumphantly forth, producing both a chair and a badge, and stalled him in a jiffy. The coolness of you two rascals is amazing, began Mr. Pickwick, trying to get up an awful frown, and only succeeding in producing an amiable smile. But the new member was equal to the occasion, and rising, with a grateful salutation to the chair, said in the most engaging manner, Mr. President and ladies, I beg pardon. Gentlemen, allow me to introduce myself as Sam Weller, the very humble servant of the club. Good, good, cried Jo, pounding with the handle of the old warming pan on which she leaned. My faithful friend and noble patron, continued Laurie with a wave of the hand, who has so flatteringly presented me, is not to be blamed for the base stratagem of tonight. I planned it, and she only gave in after lots of teasing. Come now, don't lay it all on yourself. You know I proposed the cupboard, broke in Snodgrass, who was enjoying the joke amazingly. Never mind what she says. I'm the wretch that did it, sir, said the new member, with a Welleresque nod to Mr. Pickwick. But on my honor, I never will do so again, and henceforth devote myself to the interest of this immortal club. Hear, hear, cried Jo, clashing the lid of the warming pan like a cymbal. Go on, added Winkle and Tupman, while the president bowed benignly. I merely wish to say that as a slight token of my gratitude for the honor done me, and as a means of promoting friendly relations between adjoining nations, I have set up a post office. This is getting at question 9. In the hedge, in the lower corner of the garden, a fine, spacious building with padlocks on the doors, and every convenience for the males, also the females, if I may be allowed the expression. Laurie's making a joke here. The males, spelled like mail that you put in the mail, like a mailbox. And then he's also playing on words like male versus female, right? Of the males and the females. It's the old Martin house, so it tells us in the footnotes this is a bird house. The old Martin house, but I've stopped up the door and made the roof open so it will hold all sorts of things and save our valuable time. Letters, manuscripts, books, and bundles can be passed in there, and as each nation has a key, it will be uncommonly nice, I fancy. Allow me to present the club key, and with many thanks for your favor, take my seat. So Laurie has taken a birdhouse and turned it into what? This is our question for 9. If you're not sure, take a look at that paragraph again. Great applause as Mr. Weller deposited a little key on the table and subsided. The warming pan clashed and waved wildly, and it was some time before order could be restored. A long discussion followed, and everyone came out surprising, for everyone did her best. So it was an unusually lively meeting, and did not adjourn till a late hour, when it broke up with 3 shrill cheers for the new member. No one ever regretted the admittance of Sam Weller, for a more devoted, well-behaved, and jovial member no club could have. He certainly did add spirit to the meetings and a tone to the paper, for his orations convulsed his hearers, and his contributions were excellent, being patriotic, classical, comical, or dramatic, but never sentimental. Jo regarded them as worthy of Bacon, Milton, or Shakespeare, and remodeled her own works with good effect, she thought. The P.O. (Post Office) was a capital little institution and flourished wonderfully, for nearly as many queer things passed through it as through the real office. Tragedies and cravats, poetry and pickles, garden seeds and long letters, music and gingerbread, rubbers, invitations, scoldings, and puppies. Even puppies in their post office. The old gentleman liked the fun and amused himself by sending odd bundles, mysterious messages, and funny telegrams. And his gardener, who was smitten with Hannah's charms, actually sent a love letter to Jo's care. How they laughed when the secret came out, never dreaming how many love letters that little post office would hold in the years to come. Interesting foreshadowing. Foreshadowing, a hint, okay? Okay, fifth graders, you should have a pretty good idea of the answers to all of the questions here. We've kind of talked through them, and I've given you a lot of hints. So I look forward to seeing your answers. And again, remembering that we're kind of thinking about what we know about the characters in order to draw our answers about who wrote what. Okay, good luck.